Just 5 more minutes, the old man hollered back as mother and father pinned me to the floorboard. The priest is waiting for us in the parking lot. But we never made it to the parking lot. Submitted by Greg Green. Hi, I'm Blair Bathory, and today you are joining us for the 400th episode of the Something Scary podcast. We want to thank all of our fearless listeners from the bottom of our dark hearts for joining us every week. For over 6 years, we have walked this shadow path, and we've been honored to be your whispers in the dark and the portal to your nightmares. We also want to thank you for sharing your scary tales and legends with us. So brace yourself, because the stories coming up are hungry for new souls to claim. Sometimes things we think are harmless are hiding the darkest traps, like dolls meant to be cute, cuddly companions, but are more like haunted houses stitched tight with thread, holding restless souls trapped beneath their painted smiles. What looks like innocence can be a wolf hiding in sheep's clothes, and those glassy eyes, they might be watching you, waiting for the day the thread unravels. First, silent eyes are watching, followed by Dollmaker's last stitch. Finally, in our last story, Rockabye Regret. Before we get to our stories, I wanted to just say how surreal it feels to talk about our 400th episode. People have listened to the podcast in 167 countries and over 41 million times, and we've climbed the charts to #1 in art, fiction, and overall categories, and we couldn't have done it without you. We thank you so much, and I personally just want to say thank you for allowing me to be your host for the last 3 years. So, want to hear something scary? Glass eyes don't cry. Sometimes, the dolls left behind are not just memories. They're actually waiting for their next life. Like in this story written by Sarah Lukasiewicz. Naomi Fujiwara didn't come back to Nagora for nostalgia. She came because there was no one else to bury her father. The village looked like it had been left behind as the world moved forward. After a long while, out of pity, she had been left in a place of people, life-sized, human-shaped dolls. They stood at bus stops, leaned over sewing machines, stared through rain-smeared windows, silent, immobile, watching. She remembered when Ayano had first started making them. A tribute, they said. A way to honor the dead. Naomi had found it sweet back then. It didn't feel sweet now. Her father's house, her childhood home, had a new occupant. A girl doll in a Navy school uniform sat at the foot of Naomi's old bed. Its head was tilted just wrong, eyes painted too wide, mouth half-parted in a permanent sigh. She crouched beside it. Its uniform was damp, and its socks were stained with mud. The funeral was quick. A priest recited half-hearted blessings, and the last of Nagoro's elderly shuffled away. Naomi remained behind, eyes lingering on her father's grave. The village had swallowed him, just like it had swallowed everyone else. Back at the house, she examined the doll again. Something about the hands. It took her a moment to realize. The fingernails weren't painted on. They were clipped, carefully. She pulled back. That night, something tapped on her bedroom door. 3 soft knocks. Naomi sat up, holding her breath. No footsteps, no voices. She opened the door. Nothing. The dark hallway. She turned back and nearly screamed. The doll was no longer by the bed. It was standing in the corner, facing the wall. Its head slowly turned toward her. The next morning, she marched to Ayano Tsutsukimi's home. The elderly woman answered with paint-splattered fingers and tired eyes. "I didn't make the girl in your house," Ayano said, voice flat. "I never made any of those ones that move." Naomi blinked. What? Ayano looked past her, toward the tree line. They only do it when they think no one's looking. But sometimes they pick someone to stay, someone to become. She handed Naomi a bundle of fabric. If she gives you back your clothes, it's already too late. That night, Naomi couldn't sleep. She set up her phone to record the room. In the morning, she picked up her phone to watch the video with trembling hands. The doll didn't move. Not at first. Then, at 3:46 a.m., it stood up. Its joints creaked. It turned its head too far, a full 180 degrees. Then it walked out of frame. The next 10 minutes were black. When the video resumed, Naomi was asleep, and then the doll was back in place. Only now, it wore Naomi's scarf. She checked her closet. Her coat was missing. So were 2 pairs of socks, a blouse, and her mother's hairbrush. She tore through the house, checking every room until she found the attic. Inside were dozens of dolls, not slumped or staged like Ayano's. These stood in tight rows, facing the door. Each wore real clothes, shoes still stained from outside. One held a school bag, another wore her uncle's fishing hat. And at the center, one wore Naomi's face. A plaster cast, molded and painted, imperfect, but familiar. Too familiar. She stumbled back. A hand gripped her ankle. She screamed and scrambled down the ladder. Naomi tried to leave the next morning, but her car wouldn't start. And there were no nearby taxis. She packed a backpack and ran down the path toward the main road, only to find it blocked. Dolls stood shoulder to shoulder across the path, dozens, hundreds, their eyes dull but focused. She recognized some of them, her old teachers, a neighbor who vanished during a storm, and in the center stood the girl from her bedroom, now wearing Naomi's missing coat and a name tag. Naomi Fujiwara. Naomi turned and ran, but the woods behind her had changed. The trees were wrong, twisted like a grimacing face, repeating like a looped backdrop in an old cartoon. Every path curved back to the same clearing. The dolls were closing in. She locked herself in the house, boarded the door, pushed her furniture against it. She pulled her father's journal under the floorboards. The handwriting was frantic near the end. She's waking up again. I made her too well. She remembers too much. I thought if I gave her a name, or things, she'd stay quiet. But the real Naomi came back. Now there are 2, and only one can remain. She dropped the book. Outside, the dolls had circled the house. They weren't moving. Yet. At 3:46 a.m., Naomi woke to the sound of whispering fabric. She couldn't move. Her limbs were heavy, her fingers stiff. She looked down. Her hands were wrapped in stitched cloth. Buttons replaced her nails. She tried to scream, but her mouth wouldn't open. The girl's doll stood beside her now, smiling. She leaned close, whispering, "You should have stayed gone." The next week, Iona passed by the house to leave incense. She noticed a new doll on the porch. It wore a city woman's coat. Its head was tilted just wrong, eyes wide, lips parted in a silent scream. And in its lap sat a cracked phone. The last video on it ended at 3:46 a.m. If you had ever left your childhood home, would you choose to go back or run even further away? When the line between life and lifelessness blurs, who decides which one you really are? In celebration of our 400th episode, we've designed a new t-shirt. Use the promo code 400episodes and get the shirt for 20% off all this week. We've also got some scary summer items just in time to hit the beach, the campfire, or wherever you're headed. So go to SomethingScary.com to check everything out now. When you walk into a haunted house, just make sure you're not a material for someone else's story. Like in this story, written by Colin Autred. Are you sure this is a good idea? Charlotte asked from the passenger seat of Chloe's car. Do you want to spend your Saturday night alone watching anime? Chloe asked as she navigated the dark dirt road with only the beams of her headlights to guide her. Yes, until you dragged me out here in the middle of nowhere, Charlotte grumbled. Staring out the window, all she could see were the threatening outlines of dark trees. She had been hoping to catch up on her favorite anime series and was planning on staying up all night binge watching with a few cans of energy drinks and snacks. But all of that changed when her best friend Chloe arrived at her house and practically dragged her from her computer and strapped her into her friend's car. Now thinking about what she was missing, Charlotte turned to her friend and asked again, "So, is it a good idea?" "It's the best idea I've ever had, and you're going to love it," Chloe said as she turned into a narrow driveway past several abandoned-looking cars. Charlotte rolled her eyes and watched the silhouette of a large mansion come into view. Its design was erratic, and there seemed to be no purpose or reason for the random placement of doors and windows. But what caught Charlotte's attention were the large number of strings that led into the mansion from every door and window. "Nope, no way," Charlotte cried as she tried to open the door while it was still moving and leaked out. "Are you crazy? Get back here!" Chloe cried out as she reached over and yanked her friend back inside. After a brief struggle, Chloe was able to lock the doors and get her friend back into her seat. "If I have to zip tie you in, I will," Chloe growled as she parked near the mansion and got out. "You may have to," Charlotte said as she climbed out and stared up at the sprawling structure. "Of all the places, why did you have to bring me here?" "Because I know you love listening to those creepy doll stories and haunted house podcasts," Chloe said as she opened the trunk and took out a large ball of red string, a flashlight, and 2 walkie-talkies. "This is your chance to be a part of the story." Charlotte felt a shiver rolled over her as she thought about the last podcast she had listened to. It was about this very mansion. In the early 1900s, a young woman named Claire Woods married an older oil tycoon and had 1 daughter with him. Together, they built the original mansion, which had 10 rooms, 5 bathrooms, and a ballroom, and even an indoor swimming pool. But one night, several intruders broke in and murdered her husband and daughter while Claire was out with friends. When she returned, she found their bodies floating in the pool. After that, she claimed the ghost of her family haunted her and demanded she make the house safer. She added to the mansion obsessively, trapdoors in the entrance hall that led to a private oubliette, medieval-style booby traps like spikes in walls and floors, even a piano rigged with a hidden firearm that fired if a certain key was pressed. After construction was halted due to illness, Claire locked herself in her bedroom, where she eventually died, clutching portraits of her husband and daughter. Years later, rumors spread that Claire's treasures remained hidden in the home. Would-be thieves began venturing inside, tying strings to their belts and leaving the spool outside so they could find their way back. But many never made it out. The only evidence they'd been there were the trails of string stretching into the dark. "So, you want to go in there?" Charlotte asked as Chloe tied one end of the string to her belt and clipped a walkie-talkie to her pocket. "Yep, I want to see if those stories are true." She clicked the walkie-talkie. "Can you hear me?" Charlotte nodded and made sure the string was secure, and she took the spool in her hands. She watched Chloe walk toward the mansion. Before she stepped through the door, she turned and gave a small wink. Once Chloe vanished from sight, Charlotte pressed the button on her walkie-talkie. "What do you see in there?" "This place is like a time capsule," Chloe said. "Everything in here looks like Claire just got up one day and never came back." "Lots of dust and cobwebs?" Charlotte asked. "With dusty white sheets covering the furniture?" A burst of static crackled. "Cliché, much?" "What else do you see?" A pause. Then, There are a lot of spray-painted arrows on the walls. I guess someone thought they could find their way out that way. But it's weird. What do you mean? All the arrows are going in different directions, like the walls were flipped around or something. A few minutes passed. Chloe's voice returned, uneasy. I think I can see where all the strings are going. Where? Chloe asked. But before Chloe could reply, a shriek exploded through the walkie-talkie. A spool of string in Charlotte's hand was yanked violently, and her friend's screams filled the night air. Charlotte dove for the spool, but it unspooled so fast it sliced into her palms. With a cry, she let it go and watched helplessly as she vanished into the house. Panicked but determined, Charlotte rummaged through the trunk and found a spare spool of red string. She tied one end to the car's front bumper, the other to her belt, and made her way inside. In the entrance hall, she stepped lightly along the edges of the slate floor, remembering the trap. Her heart pounded. Strings, hundreds of them, crisscrossed the halls in chaotic knots. After a dozen wrong turns, Charlotte finally found where the strings converged. Beneath a massive bookshelf, she pushed it hard, revealing a hidden door. The tangled strings were twisted now into a thick strand. She followed it. The hallway beyond was lined with shattered glass cases. Inside some, she saw what looked like antique dolls, though a few had human teeth. She reached a door. Behind it, a woman hummed. Charlotte pushed it open and stepped into a luxurious bedroom, but her eyes went wide at the dozens of cocoon bodies hanging from the ceiling, wrapped in colored string like grotesque dolls. Sitting in a wing-back chair was an elderly woman knitting. Strings from the cocoons fed directly into her yarn. She looked up and smiled. "Do you like it?" she asked. "It's for my daughter. I always need more pieces to make her perfect." It was the last thing Charlotte heard before the woman lunged and wrapped her tightly in string. The knitting needles plunged deep into the cocoon, again and again, until the thrashing stopped. Once still, Claire took up her needles and continued to knit. "You'll look so pretty when I'm done," she whispered to the unmoving girl sitting nearby. Her daughter's skin, wrinkled and gray from years in the water, was dressed in lace. Her glass eyes caught the lamplight. With her fixed smile and frozen posture, she looked just like a life-size doll. Do you believe spirits can turn grief into madness? And how do you know the doll in the corner wasn't once alive? And now, it's time for something scary from one of our listeners. And this week, I wanted to share an email from Cam. Hi there. I just listened to one of your most recent podcasts, and the 3 to 4 a.m. part really stuck with me. For the last 6+ years, I have worked down at the cemeteries for my work. In those 6 years, I've had 2 nightmares, both happening between 3 and 4 a.m. The first one was about 4 years ago. I did a burial in the springtime, and certain sections of the cemetery are wet. And by wet, I mean a lot of the ground is just water. So we always pump out the hole before we lower anything into it. And some of the water comes up sometimes, and if the casket is light, it'll float. So we have to make sure that the water isn't in there. Anyways, about a week later, I had this super vivid nightmare. I was at the cemetery, and for some reason, I was standing in a hole, and I could feel the coldness being in the hole, which is normal. I've stood in a few before. And then it caved in. And all of a sudden, I was in a local funeral home. This old man fell out of a casket onto the ground. He was quickly picked up and put back into the casket. But the casket was full of water, and he was floating in it. I can still remember his face. He was average height, a typical old person, skinny, wrinkles, white beard, white hair, and he had just the whites of his eyes. The family was standing there in the background, yelling, "How could you do that? How could you bury him in the water like that?" That's when I woke up. I was so scared, and it felt so real. I wasn't sure if I should open my eyes or keep them closed. The time was around 3:30 a.m. The second one was less than a year ago. We look after multiple cemeteries. We took over this one a few years back. It doesn't have the best kept records either, so we had to casket burial that day, and the records of where the spouse was already buried were opposite to what was on the headstone. So we decided to probe the ground to see if we could feel for a casket. We thought we had the right spot because what we were using was hitting something, and the other spot was going all the way down. Turns out we were wrong. We were hitting hard-packed clay, and the other spot was going all the way down because it had been previously excavated in like the late 80s or something. We found this out when we took a scoop and the bucket was a mix of soil, wood, and liner from the casket. I jumped down into the hole and straddled what was left of the casket and dug over to the other side to see what was going on. Once we figured it was just hard-packed ground that we were hitting, when we probed, we filled back in the hole and then dug out one spot over with no issues. Everything went like it was supposed to, but a few nights later, I had a vivid nightmare again. We were down at the cemetery, not the one we did the burial at, but the usual one we work out of. And we were trying to bury this zombie-looking person. No casket or anything, just a person who looked like a zombie laying on our lowering device. Then we decided to lay one of our cemetery carpets over them so that at least he had some cover and lowered them. It ended when I saw what looked to be like a homeless person that was living in the woods behind that cemetery walking into the woods. And then I woke up again. This one's not as scary as the first one, but I had this very strange feeling and it was so vivid. But what makes it creepy is the next morning I texted my coworker about this, and he said he had the exact same thing happen to him, except instead of burying a zombie-looking person, they were trying to get out of the hole and get him, and he was doing what he could to keep them in. When I asked him what time he woke up from this dream, he said around 3:30 a.m., which was the same time as me. One other note, our cemetery office used to be attached to the crematorium. There were a few occasions I would have to go grab something from the office on the way to our main work. I would hear banging or moving around from next door, or what sounded like muffled noises or talking. I would poke my head out the door quick to see maybe if a funeral was happening, but there was nobody there. It always happened before sunrise. I'm not one who truly believes in ghosts and the afterlife, but I had a hard time admitting that there isn't such a thing after I had those dreams and those experiences. Cam, thank you so much for sharing your stories and dreams with us. I really don't know what to make of this, but I would be scared too. As always, you can send me more of your stories at SomethingScary@Snarled.com. And don't forget, you can like and comment on this podcast on both Spotify and YouTube and let us know what you think. I read everything y'all say, and it really is helpful to us. I hope that you will stay with us for the next 400 episodes because we are so grateful for you and we want to keep telling you scary stories. Some dolls are made to comfort, but others are made to contain. Like in this urban legend suggested by Ilk's Indie Studio. We used to dare each other to touch the steps of Hull House. You'd get $5 if you made it to the porch and knocked, 10 if you looked through the mail slot, and $50 if you made it around the back and peeked through the bedroom window. No one ever got 50. No one wanted to see the devil baby. I'm not talking about some Halloween decoration or a prop someone left out to scare tourists. I mean the devil baby, the one with cloven hooves and cracked little horns, born to be an Italian girl in 1913, the one Jane Addams supposedly hid away in the attic until it died, or didn't. Depending on who you ask, it's still up there, or maybe it got out and is somewhere else. I didn't believe any of that until my cousin Danny moved to Chicago and got a summer internship at the Hull House Museum. She thought the legend was funny, said she was going to find the devil baby, take a selfie with it, and post it on TikTok with one of those cutesy ghost hunting filters. Then she stopped answering my texts. 3 days later, I got a voicemail. Hey, I need you to come. I know you think it's stupid, but look, just come, please. That was it. Her voice was shaking, like she'd just come inside from a blizzard. I got on a bus that night. Hull House during the day looks like any other old building, bricked over like a scar someone tried to hide. But even from across the street, I could feel something wrong. The windows were too dark. Not dark like no lights on, dark like something pressed up against the glass on the inside, watching. When I got closer, the plaque out front didn't say anything about a devil baby, just some stuff about Jane Addams, settlement work, and Chicago history. I went up the porch steps. Danny wasn't lying. They creaked like ribs snapping and knocked. She answered, but barely looked like herself. Hair all frizzed out, shirt stained. Her eyes were the worst part, wide and glossy, like she hadn't blinked in hours. "You came," she said, and dragged me inside, like she thought I might disappear. The museum was closed for renovations, but she still had the key. She said she was staying in one of the back rooms while the real stuff was out. Said she hadn't been sleeping. "He cries at night," she told me, not just crying, but screaming and scratching. Like claws against the walls, like little baby fingers trying to get out. I laughed, thinking it was a bit dramatic, but Danny didn't smile. She said he was real. She saw him. I asked if she meant the real baby, like a corpse or something, and she shook her head. No, something else. She said it looked like a doll but twisted, a porcelain figure left too long in the fire, bubbling up in patches, its hands twisted. Its mouth opened wider than it should. It blinked once. You know those old Victorian mourning dolls? The ones that look like dead kids? I nodded. We'd seen some at a museum in New Orleans once. It's like that, but it moves. And it knows things about me, things I've never told anyone. That night, I tried to stay up with her, tried to keep the lights on and talk her down from whatever rabbit hole she'd fallen into. But sometime after midnight, she nodded off. The crying started around 2:13 a.m. At first, I thought it was a cat outside, high and sharp. But then came the scraping, not on the walls above us, in the attic. Danny woke up screaming, like she knew what that sound meant. She shouted, "He's crazy! I didn't put it back right!" "What?" She was already running up the stairs. I followed. The attic door was wedged shut. She yanked it open, revealing a set of narrow stairs that led up into pitch black. "I dropped it," she said breathlessly. "He told me not to drop it." I asked her what the hell she was talking about. "The doll, the fake one, the decoy. They used to keep him in glass cases to show to people so they'd think it was the devil baby. But that's not him. He's behind the case. Always has been. The doll was like a tether. If it breaks..." She trailed off. We climbed the attic stairs together. They were steep and dust-choked, like no one had walked them in decades, but the door at the top was open, swung wide. And inside, there were claw marks on the rafters, thin gouges in the plaster, too small for any adult's hand, but deep and angry. And in the corner, beneath a broken trunk, was a smashed porcelain doll, its face shattered, one glass eye rolling on the floor. "Where is it?" I whispered. "I don't know," Danny said. "I thought maybe it would still be up here, but..." Then I saw it. Not the devil baby. The photo. It was a little black and white Polaroid, wedged onto the broken frame of the case. Modern, fresh. On it, standing outside the bus terminal. From that morning, no one had been near me. I didn't take it, but I was there. "I didn't take that," Danny said. "Neither did I." That's when we heard the thump below us. Something had come down from the attic before we got there. We searched the whole house, every creaking floorboard, every cobweb crawl space, but the thing, the devil baby or whatever it really was gone. Until we got back downstairs and saw the crib. It hadn't been there before, a wooden cradle, Victorian style, placed right in the center of the parlor, rocking, empty. It went to touch it, and Danny screamed, "Don't!" But it was too late. The second my hand brushed the cradle, I felt it, like a shock, like a scream, and shot through my fingertips and into my skull. And I saw things. Danny as a child hiding under her bed from a yelling man, her mother crying on the porch with a packed suitcase, Danny in a hospital bed, Danny trying to bury something small and pale behind an apartment complex in Milwaukee. None of it was mine. but now it was. The devil baby doesn't want to kill you. He wants to know you, learn your pain, wrap his doll hands around your grief and wear it like a new face. And once he has had enough, he doesn't need the doll anymore. I don't know how we got out. Danny remembers screaming. I remember tearing the photo up and throwing it in the cradle, then running. The weird part? We watched the fire on TV together at my apartment. With the cradle, we'd taken it without thinking, as if something told us to. It's still here, in my spare room. We tried to throw it out, and it came back. And now, every night at 2:13 a.m., the crying starts again. Do you believe something evil can be trapped inside an object? And what would you do if it came back, looking for you? As a special treat, keep listening. We've included a couple of our other favorite stories about dolls at the end of this episode. Sometimes, even though you have good intentions, they might backfire and come back to haunt you, like in this story inspired by Jeff. In late June 1932, the Thomas family moved into their new home, an old 3-story house surrounded by lots of trees. It had been abandoned for some time, and after lots of travel, the Thomas family were looking forward to making it their new home. Barb and her little brother, Daniel, didn't like how run down it looked. The paint was peeling and the windows were dirty. Mrs. Thomas, though, liked the nature around it. When they opened the front door, the inside was a mess. Dust was everywhere, furniture was flipped over, and there was even a rat. Barb thought there might be a dark history to the place, but her parents said it just needed some fixing up. They started redecorating, making the old house look better. While Barb was checking out her room, she found a creepy clown doll hidden among trash bags. It had a scary smile and weird eyes. Barb showed it to Daniel, and he said they should hide it away. After a couple of weeks, the house looked much nicer, but Barb freaked out when they found more creepy dolls in the basement. A sad baby doll and a bear with sharp teeth. Barb didn't like it, but her parents said they'd deal with it when they fixed up the basement. One day, Barb's parents took Daniel to the doctor for a full day trip into the city, leaving her alone at home. The doorbell rang, and she spied a delivery man outside. She watched him peeking through the curtain but pretended not to be home. When he left, she ran to grab the package. Halfway through tearing it apart, she realized it wasn't for her family. It must have been for the people who lived there before them. It was a beautiful old wooden box. When she opened it, she found a perfect-looking porcelain doll inside, with yellow eyes that looked like they were peering into her soul. The note said they were special. They were certainly different. Unlike any doll she had ever seen, or any doll she thought any girl would want, the doll gave her the creeps. She knew they weren't regular toys. It felt like the house had a scary secret, something more than just being old and abandoned. And on top of that, she felt like it was conspiring against her. Barb couldn't shake off the unease that clung to the house. With each passing moment, the doll seemed to cast a shadow over the once promising refuge. As the night settled in, the atmosphere inside the old 3-story house grew heavy with an inexplicable tension, all made worse because Barb's family hasn't returned home yet. Alone in the dimly lit living room, Barb hesitated between the need to explore the mystery further and the instinct to flee into the woods from the unsettling dolls. The silence in the house was broken only by the occasional creaking of floorboards, adding to the feeling that something else was there, watching her. Knowing she had to do something besides sit in fear all evening, Barb decided to investigate the history of the house. She rummaged through old papers left by the previous owners, hoping to find a clue about the dolls and the strange note, and why the house was abandoned in the first place. The papers revealed snippets of the past, tales of families who had come and gone, but nothing seemed to explain the sinister dolls or the energy that lingered within the walls. Finally, she stumbled upon a faded photograph tucked away in the corner of a box in the basement. The image depicted a group of people from decades ago, happily posing in front of the same house. Barb squinted at the photograph, realizing that one of the individuals in the picture had a striking resemblance to the delivery man who had dropped off the mysterious package earlier that day. A chill ran down Barb's spine as she tried to connect the dots. Could the delivery man be somehow linked to the unsettling dolls and the strange history of the house? Before she could dwell on it any further, a faint sound echoed from the upper floors. It was a soft, haunting melody, like a music box playing a tune from the past. She cautiously climbed the creaky staircase, following the melody. As she approached the top floor, the air grew colder and the dim light flickered. To her astonishment, Barb discovered a small, hidden room tucked away behind a faded tapestry. It was just clutter and junk like the rest of the house. The room seemed frozen in time, adored with dusty furniture draped in white sheets. At its center stood a weathered, antique music box, its delicate notes creating an unsettling harmony with the dolls scattered across the room. As Barb observed the scene, the doll's yellow eyes seemed to follow her every move. It was then that she realized the dolls weren't just lifeless playthings. They held a dark, supernatural energy that connected them to the house. Suddenly, the temperature in the room plummeted, and the doll's eyes glowed with intensity. The haunting melody from the music box reached a crescendo, sending shivers down Barb's spine. She felt a presence, a force from the past that sought acknowledgement and release. In that surreal moment, Barb understood that they weren't just dolls. They were vessels for the restless spirits trapped within them. The note from the package hinted at their uniqueness, but it failed to convey the why. Barb vowed to free the spirits and put an end to the haunting. As she reached out to the antique music box, the doll's eyes flickered, and the room vibrated with an otherworldly energy. The melody softened, transforming into a melodic farewell. And then Barb woke up. She looked around, but she couldn't move, and everything had a yellow tint to it. She tried to rub her eyes, but she couldn't manage to move her hands. She heard her mother's voice and tried to scream, but couldn't. She began hyperventilating, and she couldn't breathe, but nothing changed. Finally, she began to calm her breath and listened. Her parents were talking, and how they couldn't find her. She was missing. That's when Barb realized she was staring up at the ceiling in the kitchen, exactly where she left the creepy dolls in the box. She didn't free the other tormented souls from their doll cages. She joined them. Have you ever had a doll that creeped you out? One you knew wasn't just plastic? Did you have a supernatural encounter with it? If so, tell us your story by sending us an email at SomethingScary@snarled.com. Tony had always wondered why his Uncle Lee hated July 4th so much. Each year, his family would host a huge barbecue, the adults enjoying burgers and beer and the kids playing in the pool until the sun set. Once the sun had set, they'd watch the amazing fireworks shows. Everyone was happy, carefree, enjoying the celebration except for Uncle Lee. The rest of the year, on other celebrations like birthdays and Christmas, he was the life and soul of the party. Every year, Tony asked his mom why Uncle Lee seemed upset. "Doesn't he like hot dogs?" Tony would say. "Or is it the music?" But his mom would just shoo him away and tell him not to bother with his uncle. But summer after Tony's senior year of high school, a storm had hit the town, postponing the 4th of July celebrations. Tony's house was still the venue for the family gathering, but only a handful of people braved the weather. His mom was cooking dinner when the power went out. In the end, the remaining guests set up in the den with takeout pizza and started telling stories about things they'd gotten up to as high school seniors. Tony hadn't heard these stories before and was fascinated to learn about his dad TPing the principal's office for senior pranks. One of the other adults mentioned something about Uncle Lee being on the football team. Tony leaned over to his uncle. "I didn't know you played football." For the first time, Uncle Lee seemed to want to talk. "Come with me," he replied, as he stood up and motioned for Tony to follow. He led him into the kitchen. "Have I got a story for you," he said. Back in high school, he played running back on the football team. On the 4th of July, he and a couple of friends from the team were walking home from a party. They stopped at a trench on the side of the road about a mile from his house. Local legend held that a tiny man with supernatural abilities lived in the trench. Tony listened in to his Uncle Lee in awe. He had never heard of this before. Lee continued that many years ago, a young man who had thrown rocks into the trench woke up the next morning with his right leg missing, amputated mysteriously in the night. There was also a story about a teen girl who didn't believe in the legend, so she stood at the head of the trench and cursed at it, taunting the so-called little man known as Red Boots. But the next morning, she woke up to find her tongue had been cut out. Tony's eyes widened as Lee shook his head and said, "Of course, we didn't really believe in the stories. At least not then." Knowing that he was the fastest runner on the team, one of his friends said, "Lee, I'll give you $100 if you go into the trench and run from end to end." Lee agreed. Besides, there wasn't really anyone going down there, was there? Lee made his way down the hill and tried to get a visual of the other end. "On your mark, get set, go!" He bolted like a bullet, looking to left and right, watching how fast he was passing the bushes. His confidence was short-lived when he suddenly heard the rustling of bushes to his left. The sound as if someone or something was running through the bushes beside him, matching his exact pace. He began to think about all of the stories he heard about this trench. He was now very afraid to look to his left, but he mustered up the courage to do so. When he turned his head to the left, all he could see were a pair of glowing red boots, running as if they were trying to keep up with him. Lee began to run faster and faster, but to no avail. No matter how fast he ran, the glowing red boots maintained the same speed. All of a sudden, the boots took off and disappeared. He felt a slight feeling of relief when they disappeared, until he looked straight forward and saw the glowing red boots standing firm about 20 yards in front of him. He tried to bring himself to a stop, hoping to juke to the left or the right of whatever was in front of him, but as soon as he got closer, he could see the small man who was wearing the boots. He was about 2 feet tall, and his face was horribly scarred and disfigured. Frightened by the figure's appearance, Lee lost his footing, causing him to trip and fall hard to the ground. He looked up, almost sure that he would see Red Boots standing over him, but to his surprise, he was alone. Terrified, he quickly jumped to his feet and began running as fast as he possibly could to get to the other side of the trench. Suddenly, Lee felt a sharp pain in his right calf, and he fell to the ground once again. He quickly turned over to examine his leg and saw a small rusty blade had pierced his calf. He yelled out loudly as he struggled to pull the blade from his leg. Suddenly, Red Boots appeared again in front of him, and as the pain in Lee's leg intensified, the creature said,
"Now do you believe the stories?"
Tony looked at his uncle, his mouth wide open in horror. Lee continued. He made it to the end of the trench and climbed out as fast as he could. He told his friends what he'd seen, and to start with, they thought he was joking, until they saw the nasty gash on his leg. He limped home, wrapped his leg with an old t-shirt, and got into bed and covered his head, praying until he finally fell asleep. But the wound got infected, and the damage to his leg meant he could never run or play football again. He lost contact with his buddies and never ever went near that trench again. Lee was silent as he sipped his drink, letting the story register. Tony's eyes glanced down to Lee's leg. He was wearing shorts, and there it was, a large scar of the back of his left calf. "That's why I hate the 4th of July. And," Lee added, looking out of the kitchen window and across the large backyard, Old Red Boots Trench just happens to be at the very bottom of your property past the dumpsters. After the guests had all left, Tony took out the trash, only this time, he was a little nervous. As he edged towards the back gate, where the dumpster was, he thought he could hear a rustling sound. He quickly threw away the garbage, and just as he was about to rush back into the yard, saw a quick flash of red and heard a small voice. So quiet it was like an echo in the wind.
I'm still waiting.
Are there any local legends in your town? Has anyone from your family experienced them? What would you do if you knew Red Boots lived at the bottom of your backyard? This week's podcast stories were edited by Sarah Lukasiewicz, narration by Blair Bathory, audio edited and mixed by Fitz Harris, additional audio editing by Calvin Linderman, produced by Anna Villalobos, executive produced by Gail Gilman, music by Sapphire Sindalo and Calvin Linderman. If you have a story you'd like to submit, send me an email at somethingscary@snarled.com. Don't forget to watch the video version of Something Scary over at youtube.com/snarled. And if you'd like to support the show and everything we do at Snarled, join our Patreon at patreon.com/snarled.